What's up, you little creeps? The purpose of this video is to talk about the newest LOB patch that came out in late March 2026. There's a issue, I think, that needs to be addressed, and I want to talk about that here. I do want to stress that I think the rest of the patch is pretty good. I've only played 2 or 3 games, so I don't have a ton of experience, but I do think that this issue probably needs to be addressed, and so I wanted to make a video about it just in case this ends up getting to Sophie Games, the developers, at some point. So the issue is essentially that you play a game of chicken with your opponent at the start of the game. The winner of the game of chicken has a huge advantage at that point that is almost insurmountable for an opponent. So if the developers want you to play a game of chicken at the start of the game and then proceed to play the rest of the game, that's obviously a choice for them to make. But it doesn't seem like it's the intent of the game. I don't think Napoleonic armies, well, I mean, they did march around to try to get to advantageous positions, but I don't know that once the battle started, everybody was sprinting across the battlefield to try to get to the middle of the map. Anyway, I have 2 games to illustrate this, both that I've played. I'm going to briefly play them on 2x speed for you to see what I'm talking about, and then I will talk about what happens. Okay. So going over, I have a screenshot of this, game 1. Okay, so the issue with this is that at the start of the game, we played this game of chicken to get to the middle objectives. The objectives now give you victory points for every turn that you hold more than your opponent, I think is how it works. And you'll notice I've circled the objectives in red here. So there's one here, 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 and here. And at the start of the game, I used all the light forward deploying units and I sprinted up the battlefield to try to get to these objectives as early as possible. I was successful in doing so. I won the game of chicken. And then at that point, if I go back here, you can look, there is a stat here that's time under pressure. I believe this is the time that you have had your opponent controls more objectives than you. And as this builds up, the person with more objectives gains victory points. The person that does not have more objective points is time under pressure, which I believe contributes to your org regain. So you can see at the end of this battle, they're already at negative 35%, despite only being at 17% power loss to my 10%, which isn't like a crazy ratio, right? But I am clearly ahead. And the main issue with this is that my opponent is completely stuck. Pull this back up. And I realize at this point that I don't have to do really anything. I just sit and wait and force my opponent to come into my canister range on my guns. I force them to walk into my lines, taking fire the whole time because I am winning on these objectives because I won the game of chicken. And you can see at the end of the game, the line of battle here that I've drawn, this blue line, I control 3 of the objectives. My opponent is forced to come into this horrible position here and get destroyed. And so it was an easy victory. The second example is a little less clear, and this is on a larger game, the battle size, I believe. And this one's very quick, so my opponent conceded early, so I'll just let this play. Okay, so my opponent seems reasonably competent. Oops, yes, this is the right one. Seems reasonably competent. We have the game of chicken. You saw the game of chicken play out. I'll actually go back to about here and watch the game of chicken that happens over these forests and this star here. I'll slow it down slightly. So we both are rushing to the center. He backs up. He charges in. I charge back, countercharge, but the end result is that I take the center with the skirmishers in the forest and the light infantry up here far enough to hold back that charge. And then there's a scuffle over here where I gain the upper hand. But close that one. Or no, that was the right one, I think. There we go. So as you can see, I've drawn the line in for where the lines roughly were when my opponent conceded. And you can see that I again have 1, 2, 3 of the objectives to my opponent's 1 objective. And not only that, this type of rush up to grab the objectives chicken gameplay can have a double stacking effect, which you can see in this game, where seizing the center of the map is really important because of the objectives. But typically, if you're also doing that, you typically win a few terrain features in the center of the map, which in this case I did. So for example, I have an extremely strong defensive position at the end of this turn. So I think my opponent conceded because he now has to attack through this choke point, and I have this gap here that I have to defend, which is only defended by some horse and some militia here, but I have units that I'm going to be able to bring in time. And I have all 3 objectives, and he must attack through here in these forests, or out in the open over here where I have this very strong force. So my opponent now has a huge uphill battle, and they are going to also be getting the time under pressure stat, and I will just show that briefly that it does exist. So you can see already time under pressure is already ticking, and we're at the negative 6.87, whatever that means. And it's only like what turn? It's probably somewhere in here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like 5 turns have been played, and there's a 6th turn coming up. So anyway, the start of the game is a game of chicken. Whoever wins the game of chicken has a huge advantage, and that is sometimes true because of terrain in previous LOB patches, but in this LOB patch, it's exacerbated by the fact that once you grab those objectives, you don't need to do anything. You can essentially become a camper once you have the objectives. So that the first couple turns of sprinting and running and light infantry, cavalry, and skirmisher gameplay is kind of the most important phase of the game now, it seems. And then whoever wins that is probably going to win. I could be wrong. I've only played a couple of games, but I did want to highlight this. And I do also want to point out one last time that I think everything else in the patch is really good. And I want to also present a solution to this problem that might work. I'm not an expert, right? And so I'm going to go to Warhammer 40K, everybody's favorite stand-on circles, dudes on a map game. Typically in the layouts that we play in the US, there is your home objective, which is our big blue star here, this guy. Then you have your, typically the maps are arranged so that there's a natural expansion objective, an objective that's easy for you to take, hard for your opponent to take, and it's close to your lines. And ideally both players have one of these. And then there is a central objective that both players fight over. That might be a little bit better of a system here. It would maybe there would need to be 2 objectives in the middle instead of just the 1. But I think both players need to have an easily obtainable objective, and then the objectives in the center need to be less impactful in some way. You do want to control them, and I do like the time under pressure mechanic, but I think with the 2 objectives, so you can get like a 3-to-1 ratio, I think that's too intense. So maybe 1 objective in the middle, and then you have a 2-to-1 ratio, which maybe gives your opponent a little more breathing room to actually gather up their army and fight for the center without having that time under pressure bonus really impact the fight. That's all. Thanks so much. Catch you later. Bye.